It's time for Supply Chain Now. Broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Will Haraway right here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's episode. We got a great one in store. Will, are you ready?
I'm ready, my friend.
So we're gonna be covering all the bases here today. We're gonna be talking a little bit of baseball. We're gonna be talking a lot of supply chain tech, in particular freight tech, with a business leader and a company that's helping other organizations streamline their operations and really, making their freight much more visible and work for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, can't wait to talk to. Should we reveal his name or are we
Not
gonna
yet.
Not
Not
yet.
yet.
Okay, we're
It's
gonna keep
coming.
him in the dark. Yeah, he's ready.
Well, so to our audience and community, hey, stay tuned for a great conversation and a fun conversation, a little bit of baseball and a lot about some of the cutting edge stuff going on in the supply chain tech space. Hey, quick programming note before we get started here. If you enjoy this conversation, make sure you find us and subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. We do offer a money back guarantee. So with no further ado, now, Will, we can bring in our guests here today. JP Wiggins, co-founder and leader of corporate development and business strategy for 3G TMS. JP, how you doing?
Oh, great. Hey, glad to be here. Thanks, guys.
So
yeah, hey, well, JP's got he's got like that baseball player name, doesn't he?
He does. He sounds like a platoon first baseman.
Yeah, it's actually more of a second baseman's name. I think if we go through the time, I was trying to think of the second baseman that had more initials for the names, but definitely I'm an outfielder, just to put it out there.
So okay. First time he came on, I went hunting. I thought for sure I had an old Don Russ or Topps baseball card with JP Wiggins on it, but I'm still hunting that thing down. But nevertheless, we'll save baseball for just a minute because, JP, it's been great to have you on the show several times now. So a lot of our community members and audience will recognize and recognize your story. But for the two people that may be new to you here, tell us a little about yourself.
I kind of consider myself an entrepreneur in the transportation and logistics space. So I've founded and co-founded 4 different startups in the industry. First one was a company called with WSDC. We sold it to McHugh Freeman, became now part of Blue Yonder. Did another one, DXDT. We sold that to Descartes. Worked for Descartes, was general manager of Descartes when we went public. Then did another one called Glog, which we sold to Oracle Transportation Management. Worked at SAP for a while in their travel and transportation business units, where that was the unit responsible for SAP's TM and warehouse management piece. So spent a lot of time there. And most recently, we did the startup here with 3G TMS, where co-founded it with some of our former friends, and we've been in this for it'll be 8 years in April actually now. So again, we're as the name says, TMS, Transportation Management System. So
We'll talk more and make sure folks know exactly what y'all do. I got to ask you though, you just rattled off a ton of marquee names. And a lot of names that folks will recognize. So you've been there and done that numerous occasions. Can you tell me what was one of your favorite environments to work in amongst all those cultures, all those situations, environment? What's one that you really enjoyed?
Well, I love the entrepreneurial startup. I mean, it's tough. It's hard. When you start a company up, you're putting in that 100-hour weeks and you're doing everything from cleaning toilets to, doing your accounts payable. But, on the other side, the one thing that was really surprising to me is when I went to SAP, you get the big corporate annuity and everyone has, some people have outside views of SAP being this evil, ugly giant. But when I got in there, the corporate culture was really professional. So, it was a whole different type of atmosphere, but it was refreshing because, you're working with very smart other professionals. And sometimes on smaller companies, you don't get to hire that caliber of professionals to work with. You're working with your cousin or your uncle or, once you have a name and you have a network, you can start pulling in the best in the industry. So, but it's different. So, I kind of look, hindsight's 2020, but you know what? I really loved everywhere I work, and I can't say that, hey, this was a favorite or this wasn't a favorite. So, and then I've worked at the biggest companies and done startups. So, it's all good. It's just your world's what you make of it, right?
It's
So,
All Good Man. One of our
yeah.
favorite shows here in the Luton household. It's All Good Man. Love
Mhm.
that show. All right.
It's all good.
And
Yeah.
by the way, SAP, we just collaborated with them on something at NRF. And to your point, I mean, incredible professionals. And I really love their approach to creating content, right? Very agnostic, story driven about leading
All customer driven.
challenges.
Yep.
Yeah. That's
Customer driven. Take a customer. You want to tell something, you talk about how a customer's doing, and that's how you express yourself. So no, it's a great approach. And actually that's stuck with me, and I still do here. And that's probably my lead approach when we talk about things here at 3G is say, hey, this is a success that I've done with XYZ company, and this is what they say. And other than that, everything else is just marketing noise. I mean, how much do you hear? It's just a bunch of crap. Someone says, oh, I'm going to save you 30%. Well, everyone says that.
right. Everybody does. All right. Well, as much as the story needs to be about the customer, the story needs to also weave in some baseball. And that's where all three of us have a
passion
in spades for the game of baseball. Of course, Will Haraway is legendary. Will, back in the days of some of the earliest shows, were at the SMC3 Jumpstart. In fact, where we met you, JP. And that's when I really realized that I might be in over my head with just how much Will knows about baseball, including my own team. Because, 3 kids have killed my memory. I used to be able to rattle off stats and numbers and players. Yeah. But Will is a student of the game, but as is JP Wiggins. So JP, we're going to talk a little baseball. JP, you're a big student of the game. You
Indians
umpire.
Fan.
And a Cleveland Indians fan. You umpire for high school teams, and you donate those paychecks to charity, which I think is really cool.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. What's your favorite part about the game of baseball?
I got to be a Class 1 umpire here in the state of Ohio, so I'm certified. It's not, but baseball for me is like an onion. And the more you peel it back, there's just so many different layers. And I know Will's into a whole different aspect of the game, the players, the statistics, the histories, the teams. Sure. I'm not into that. I'm actually into the mechanics of the game itself. And that's actually, it's a kid's game. Let's be realistic. And at some point, they're going to come and tell you, you're too old to play this game. And I was 15-year-old when they told me I was too old to play and I had to make the high school team. But then I got into umpiring because I learned a whole nother layer of the game. And I'm one of those guys that can sit and watch a pitcher's duel in a game that's decided 1-0 and really get a kick out of it, because I can understand. I'm watching that catcher flip in. No, he's going to call the inside curve. No, he's throwing the slider. And I'm like, no, you can't throw the slider. You know what he's going to do with it? Oh, there it goes. So, that's that detail level that then the way the mechanics works, the emphasis is on the rules, the unwritten rules. I mean, that's what I really love about the game itself. So more than, I follow the professional teams, I watch it, but I go to more high school and travel ball games and little league games, and the passion that these kids have and the athleticism, and I can just see what it's doing for their life. You're dedicating yourself, you're really learning something. And I don't know, I get more of my enjoyment from baseball actually comes from the non-professional level than the professional level itself. So like I said, it's an onion. You just got to keep peeling and layering that layer back. So
it's a Vidalia onion at that, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Will, same question to you. I know you're very passionate about the game. What's your one favorite element?
Well, before, I do, like, as you already know, Scott, I love the history. I'm terribly sad about all of the, Hall of Famers that have died in the last, 4 to 5 to 6 months, including Hank Aaron, Bob Gibson and Lou Brock from the Cardinal family, So I love the history and how all of that connects without question. And I still I can still run lineups in my head from 20 years ago. Wow. And I'll do that before if I'm trying to make myself go to sleep, I'll do that. So I do love that minutia of the game. But JP, just because you're an umpire, when I used to play, I remember early on when I was a pitcher and I thought I was pretty good. And my dad was obviously at the game and watching me, and I was throwing, I thought pretty well, and I didn't think I was getting calls. I think I was maybe like 12, and I didn't think I was getting calls. I was like, where's this call? And I started peeking in at the ump and kind of peeking in at him, like, that's my call, and I did it throughout a half inning. And the ump was super cool about it though. I mean, I was definitely being a jerk, like a jerky little 12-year-old, and he just kind of came out there and hitched up his pants. He did not show me up like I was showing him up. He came up there and he was like, son, if I see you do that again, we're going to have a major problem. And he just said it just to me, just like that. Yeah. And I'm like, yes, sir, you got it. And then when I got in the car, my dad was like, that ain't happening anymore, buddy, if you want to play baseball. So I don't know.
You'd have loved me as an umpire because my strike zone is the hugest. Because, you know, in my level, high school level, you know, it's funny. Batters turn around and look at me all the time, go, "What? That was a strike?" And, you know, he's like, he was expecting ball for a walk. And I tell the batter, "What? No one ever made the team because they could take a walk, dude. Hit the ball. The next one's a strike too. Just you watch."
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No,
Well, all right. So
I definitely would have appreciated that.
yeah, I bet. So let's talk about a couple of the elements of baseball. So first off, I want to touch on a couple of rules changes that may or may not stick for the 2021 season. We'll see what kind of season plays out. We were talking pre-show about the rule change of the runner starting on second base as they went into extra innings. Or it started in the 10th inning or 11th. I can't remember. 10th inning.
First inning. 10th,
First inning of extra innings.
First extra inning.
First inning innings, yeah.
So Will, you go first here. Your thought of that rule, and will it stick?
I thought I was going to hate it. I did not like it one bit when they announced it. I thought I was going to hate it. And then the first time that it happened, I actually really liked it, you know, and I was like, oh, it's exciting immediately, because any fan on the level of the three of us have sat there all night, you know, in a 6-6 game when the players are dog tired and they keep bringing in relievers and the hitters absolutely can't hit them, you know, and it just goes to 13, 14, 15 innings. And it's just, you just want it to end at one point. And the other thing is that it'll ruin your team for like a whole solid week, you know,
right.
It'll ruin the pitching staff for sure. You know, so if you could just get it over with, you know, I think the odds of it even out. I mean, there'll probably be one or two that you'll be pretty annoyed at, like, you know, one wild pitch, one walk, and then a bloop single, and the game's over. You'd be annoyed at that, sure, but that'll happen for you on the other end too eventually. You know, I wouldn't want it in the playoffs though. They'd have to kill it in the playoffs.
Where's Rick Camp when you need one? 3 homers. All right. So JP, your quick take on this one
same
rule.
thing. I guess for me, it was, if you think about the regular season, teams are playing almost every night or multiple games. You know, maybe they have one day off. And if you think about it, you got to you want a fair game for the next game. You don't want to have a team that blew out their entire bench and, you know, their bullpen is actually shot on the game before. So I actually really like the rule because it helps preserve the integrity of the game for tomorrow's game or the day after's game. So, and we saw this happen time and time again throughout history, which is team blows out their, you know, they go to that 17 innings or whatever, and they've got no bullpen left for the next game, and they lose the next 2 games trying to catch up. So I think it makes for better baseball, if nothing else. That and I hate waiting. I'd stay up till 2 in the morning watching those games too.
Right.
So
I've done it.
Good game. I like Will's point. I love the game. Love that rule change in the regular season. Hate it in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. All right. So one last tidbit about baseball. I want to go round robin. JP, you're a big Cleveland fan. Will's a big St. Louis fan. I'm a big Atlanta Braves fan. Let's give you, in a nutshell, the Reader's Digest version of the season they're going to have in 2021. JP, let's start with you.
Yeah, Indians are going to go above 500 baseball, but they're not going deep in the playoffs. This is more of a rebuilding year. They don't have the money to basically put together a team to go deep.
Well, okay, that was really Reader's Digest. Will, what about you?
I think the Cards will do the exact same thing they've done the last 2 years, which is either win their division or make their playoffs, but through no real effort of their own. The rest of every team in the Central, actually in both Centrals, JB can appreciate it, is not spending any money. They're not even, and so like the Cubs have thrown away Yu Darvish. They're getting ready to trade, you know, Chris Bryant, I think, which is insane to me, but it sounds like they're going to like. The Brewers are just hoping that Christian Yelich returns to MVP form, and they're not nobody's doing anything. So simply by the fact that the Cards have an incredible pitching staff, we'll probably win 85 games, and that'll be enough. And then we'll get crushed by the Dodgers or the Padres in the playoffs, like we have the last couple of years, or the Nationals last few years.
How do you beat the Dodgers with that money? I don't know.
Yeah. And the Padres, talk about off season. The Nationals have been signing several free agents that I'm afraid, you know, I think the Braves, quick prediction, I think they'll make the playoffs, but, you know, they've got so much talent, but they need a couple of those big pieces. And with the ownership situation and with the market economics, as Will points out, you know, it's going to be hard to replicate a year like last year where they had the Dodgers on the brink and just couldn't quite,
so
quite
close.
do it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. All right. So as much as I hate to move on from the game of baseball, there's so much more there to tackle. I'm sure for the handful of folks that don't like the game of baseball, let's talk supply chain tech. So before we do that though, JP, we're just wrapped up, thankfully. In fact, we're almost wrapped up the first month of 2021. So 2020, although the effects and circumstances, some of the dynamics have not left us, still the year is gone, thankfully. So at least there's that. But what's a couple of key takeaways or eureka moments from a year like 2020 for you?
Can I talk politics?
Sure.
No, I mean, the two big ones for me, first off was an easy one, which, COVID hit, and we are a software company. We built, 8 years ago, I started an in the cloud company. So we're 100% cloud born, and we were selling our software first. People were telling us, well, how can I buy your software? What happens if the internet goes down? I won't be able to ship my freight. So they wouldn't buy our software because they were worried about the internet going down. I literally had some of those same exact people calling me up going, what do I do now when I can't go into my office to ship my freight? So, and versus our customer base, oh heck, any customer, they just, grabbed the laptop and ran it. So it's kind of that eureka moment, which is, this internet thing, it's pretty cool. So, but the whole shift in balance from just to shoot when we started this startup 8 years ago, sorry, to say, I don't want to buy your software because you're internet only. And, what happens when you go out when the internet goes down? So versus, so it was just kind of eureka. The other eureka moment is the strength of our country. I really do believe in our two-party system. I do, and I don't know if you're Republican or you're Democrat or you believe which method is which is right, but I believe that somehow between the two of them, they figure it out. That I know it doesn't look like we do stuff and things are hard, but yet the resilience of our economy came through this pandemic, and actually it came through pretty dang good. Yeah, our whole private sector, yes, things are slaughtered, but even in my customer base, I have whole industry clusters, like my automotive industry cluster completely disappeared for me on 3 months. We see because we get charged by transaction, and there's like 0 transactions going to the automotive industry versus in other sections of the industries, food and beverage and stuff, which is going crazy. So, but in general, everything's bounced back. I mean, yeah, we're stuck on restaurants or everything's changed, but the strength of the economy to be able to get through this pandemic is just, that was kind of, it shows you how really good we have it, how good our whole overall system is that we can punch ourselves through this pandemic.
Yeah, great point. The workforce behind the economy. We were talking earlier today with a shipping company and a bank that puts together a wonderful freight index that speaks to what's going on. We spent a ton of time talking about drivers and just how they don't get enough recognition. They kept the economy moving. They kept stuff moving. Of course, you got retail clerks. You've got supply chain workforce. Of course, you've got folks in fulfillment centers that have enabled e-commerce for many consumers to honor the quarantine and still get stuff and protecting their psyche. So the workforce behind this economy has just, the American economy and the global economy has just been nothing short of remarkable.
And us on the tech side, we're able to respond. I mean, we have wholesale changes that go on in the industry and tech. I mean, we fast forwarded tech like e-commerce modes and distribution modes. I mean, we fast forwarded 2 to 3 years in the matter of 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, that's a great point. We were at, and Will, I'd love for you to weigh in here, but we were at NRF. I heard Walmart's chief customer officer speak, Jane, I can't remember her last name. And she mentioned exactly what you said. 5 years of digital transformation in 5 months, I think is the exact quote that they've been experiencing. And she also said that thankfully Walmart, and I'm not going to quote her exactly, but thanks to how they've been investing in their supply chain for over a decade, really helped keep stuff on the shelves in many ways. Now, of course, in any retailer, including Amazon, had certain challenges of certain items, but it's really testimony to the technology, the economy, the workforce behind it, how we persevered through this incredibly unique and challenging times. Will, what sticks out? What JP shared some of his eureka moments. What sticks out for you?
Yeah, I mean, you and I have probably talked about this throughout 2020, and when we've done these podcasts, is again, I'm a positive guy, and I can find something positive in just about anything. And in this case, it's the fact that this really was a spotlight on the supply chain that maybe the rest of the world, didn't understand just exactly how things get to their homes or get to stores or get to the grocery store. and the minutia of all of the levers that get pulled to make that happen, and the people behind the scenes that make it happen, from the tech developers down to the drivers, and to be able to respond on macro levels, like, okay, your shipping source, your sourcing is disrupted in China. Okay, well, now I've got to start near sourcing. I've got to start reshoring. I've got to start looking at what can I do in Mexico? What are my options? And people were able to do that and look at 3PLs and, just be flexible. And that's been the most impressive thing to me as well. I mean, we just adjusted. But in a way, that's what supply chain has always been. This been the strength.
Agreed.
I mean, look at the shortages. I mean, really, we don't talk about shortages anymore because, yeah, you might have some product shortages in certain sectors and stuff like that. But even the only real shortages that really happened was shortages related to some paper products, and there's some specific reasons why with that. But even that industry, adapted and overcame.
Yeah,
and we don't have.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah, adjusted. So it's like the amount, how quickly we're able to adjust in supply chain and actually make it through it. I mean, wholesale changes to our distribution chain. Distribution wise, I mean, before we were all set to the manufacturer to distributor, distributor to retailer, retailer to consumer. And now we've just completely bypassed a lot of things. And now it's direct to consumer or direct near consumer is kind of the whole strange. And it's just like a complete redesign of your network. But we did it. We just did it. We just, not even thinking about it, just did it.
And beyond the conditions that the pandemic imposed on the world, the shifting consumer buying preferences to react to that, and how so much industry adjusted. I'm not gonna say pivoted. Gosh, I've heard that every other sentence, but it really is. It's remarkable. It is remarkable. But we all know that to do all that, you've got to have an incredible technology platform, regardless in what sector you serve or what aspect of the operations. We're going to focus a little more on the transportation side, given 3G TMS here. And so as we segue here, tell us a bit, JP, for the three people that may not know, what does 3G TMS do?
We're a non-asset-based multimodal transportation management system. That's how Gardner classifies this section. So basically what we do is for shippers, 3PLs, brokers, is we manage orders. Your customer places an order for your product. Well, 100 orders, you might have 1,000 customers, and you need to figure out how to physically execute that movement, how to physically get it from point A to point B. And what we do is we manage those commercial carriers. So whether you're going to put it on parcel or ship LTL or truckload, you need to build multi-stop truckload. You need to execute with those carriers. You need to track freight while it's in transit. You need to pay those freight bills. If you're 3PL, you need to figure out your customer charges because you've managed that service for you. So that's in a nutshell what a TMS does. So it's a classic thing that's an add-on. Your ERP manages your finances, and maybe you have warehouse management systems. We're looking to those to get us the orders and to tell us inventory availability, but we're the actual execution, which I like to say we're actually what touches your customer. When you're actually delivering freight to the customer, it's your TMS that made that decision for you, that's then responsible for that customer transaction of physically getting them that goods and your product and services. So, that's what TMSs do. Modern TMSs were born in the cloud. Rating is a big piece of what we do. Managing the rates, managing which carrier is best. And then it's all constraint driven. So which carriers are going to be best? What mode's going to be best? Can I maybe consolidate shipments? Maybe I can build multi-stop truckloads, all that good fun stuff. But, hey, if you're a company, typical averages is you spend about 10% of your revenue on your freight transportation. So maybe 8 to 10% is going to spend on it. Some industries are higher, some are lower, but your $100 million company, you're spending $10 million on this. So, some companies take it as core business, some outsource to 3PLs. So we sell both. We'll sell both to the shipper, like that's real popular in food and beverage, where when you're buying the food and the beverage, you're not just buying the product, you're actually buying the fulfillment of the supply chain. You're buying the actual delivery. So companies that take that in-house versus some of it turn it over to 3PLs. And then they have a 3PL that manages it for them. So our software works in both cases to actually do that freight execution,
So, it seems to be like the age of TMS, right? And I would make a few assumptions. The data that's at our fingertips, and more of the disruptions taking place across the freight industry. But why is it? Well, first off, is that right? As me, I'm not in the TMS business. It seems like there's been so much more attention and investment in this space. Is that right? And number two, why?
Yeah, it's been literally. I talked to Gardner, the analyst group, earlier today, and it's been the highest rise in TMS in the history of the industry, and it's actually growing it faster than any other segment in supply chain for supply
Yeah.
chain technology. Against WMSs, supply chain demand networking companies are right up there too. So, but it's now, it's the number one thing they're getting asked for from the shipper side. And why is that? Well, companies take a look what's happened. We've had these major disruptions that happened in the pandemic. Costs have skyrocketed in many different sectors and modes of transportations. Those costs have hit the bottom line, and you got CFOs out there going, do something, do something, do something, and so, well, what's one of the best ways that you can do something is to take more of an automated approach to your command and control of your transportation execution, and that's what TMSs do. So that's
Excellent. That is you are a very succinct, on the money communicator, JP. If it needs 17 syllables to get a
give it
message
in
across,
5. I can name that
yes,
tune.
I'm jealous. I'm very jealous of that ability. All right, so in a minute, Will's going to ask you more about the environment and some tips for shippers. But let's talk about this version 20.3 release. So I was on your website earlier. There's a slew of aspects related to this release. Rather than go through all of them, just what's in your view, what's the one most important aspect of this release, and why does it matter?
Well, we kicked out a Q4. We still have a very large R&D staff. So TMSs are very, very feature function oriented software. We're not something that you can throw together a quick TMS with just a couple of folks. But literally, we're talking, I have 50 plus resources on the R&D side, and we got 8 years into this, and we're talking 50, 80, $100 million of R&D costs into these types of things. So our 20.3 years, our Q4 release last year, we're doing an agile release, so we kick releases out all the time. But we did a lot around brokerage capacities, brokerage environments, whether you're a shipper self-brokering and finding brokerages, or you're an actual true freight broker and you're doing that margin game of finding capacity to truckload. So, but we did a lot around finding carrier sourcing is a big feature that we added into, and safety and enhancement. That's huge. You got to make sure your carriers are insured. And that's like the number one thing when you onboard a new carrier. Does he have the proper insurance? Do you have the right insurance coverage? Because if you ship a freight without the right insurance and you get into an accident, you literally can put your company out of business. So, a lot of load advances and things like that too. So another cool ones we did is a lot when we do a lot of planning and optimization is figuring out, like, remember when you place an order, the order management system just gives us details. Well, they ordered 16 widgets and here's the dimensions and stuff like that. But then we have to let the computer figure out, well, how does that fit in a truck? Can it be stacked? Can it be palletized? How do you actually build the pallet? So we put a lot of features into palletization and stackability, which allows us to, when I'm looking at cramming orders into a truck, well, how many orders fit and which ones fit best, and do that whole game there. So there's a lot of itemization features that we put in there. So
You need a protractor.
yeah,
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, and then can I stack something on top of it? Because the trucks are what, X feet tall, and am I dealing with a 48-foot truck or a 53-foot truck or double pups? I mean, there's a lot that goes into that gets to be real complicated real quick. So that's some of the big ones. The other one is, obviously, you guys know we merged in with the PaceJet, the parcel system. So we have our parcel software, and we add tons of stuff so that we're taking all that tier one parcel management and using it in our TMS planning also. So it just allows us to just take that best of breed stuff when I'm doing my TMS planning. So that's kind of what I did. So fun stuff.
Love it.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, it's great.
All right, so let's shift from 3G TMS and the platform and some of the upgrades there. And I love the focus on safety. Safety. In fact, talk about, Will, you're talking about silver linings related to the pandemic, that in incredibly enhanced corporate focus on safety is certainly something I hope sticks around for years or decades to come. We'll see. So Will, where are we going next? I think we're talking about the environment next, right?
Well, we talked about the fact that there's been a big focus on TMS in the supply chain over the past couple of years. A lot of that has to do with trying to make sense of the always shrinking capacity that you see. And that was even before the pandemic, is the capacity, for loads, the capacity for, ocean shipping, air shipping, over the road shipping. So especially in the context of your new releases and your and the updates that 3G TMS is making, just what can you give some advice about the ways that people can use their TMSs to successfully navigate this limited capacity environment? And that was before the vaccine started to be shipped all over the country, taking off the reefer capacity.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing if you want to go from a statistics perspective, capacity isn't the issue, it's the costs that go up. And it's a supply and demand type of market. So there's less capacity, so your costs are going to go up. So you can find capacity, you're just going to pay for it, is really what it comes down to. To make matters worse, we talk about Amazon a lot. Amazon formed a brokerage wing, and they went out and they locked up a very significant percentage of North American truckload fleets. So no one will tell you exactly what it is, but my best guess is close to 10% of North American fleet capacity was locked up by Amazon. Now, their whole theory is they were going to then broker out that excess capacity to shippers as a digital freight marketplace. But it was like a crystal ball move, and someone there is just sleeping with angels, I swear, because they mainly did that to make sure that their growth wouldn't be hampered by the lack of capacity. That happened to them in the past. But then they locked up these fleets. So in other words, our capacity for the general market is even worse because Amazon took over a major percent of the capacity in North America too. So for their own needs. Now they're not really brokered much out because they need it. They did some wonderful things. So great things going on there. But for the rest of the market, I mean, year over year, from just January this year to last year, we ran some basic stats on all freight going through my system, and it's the same percent. I use DAT and Freight Waves and some of the other conservative services out there, but freight is up 27% right now, January. So you're paying 27% more for your freight this month than you were January or last year. And this is all pre-pandemic. And that's before fuel starts to kick in. Fuel gets adjusted weekly for truckloads. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but every week you pay your freight for your truck, and then you pay your fuel surcharge, and that freight surcharge gets adjusted every week. And fuel's cheap right now. It's going to get expensive. I don't care what politics you feel. Fuel was going to get more expensive in 2021. So most likely than not, by the end of this year, you're probably going to be paying 35% more for truckload freight than you were last year. So think about what that really means. If you're that $100 million shipper we're talking about, and you're spending $10 million on truckload freight, well, you're now going to be spending an extra $3 million, and that $3 million is going to come right out of your bottom line. So it's something you got to pay attention to. In answer to your question, what can a TMS do? Well, our TMSs, what we do is we find the best alternative in the abilities that currently exist. So in a constantly dynamic environment, you may want to figure out different mode shifts. Like, well, maybe I shouldn't ship truckload to this. Maybe I can put it on LTL, or maybe I can put some of my parcels to LTL, or maybe I consolidate some of my parcels down. Maybe I can do different modes like pool distribution. You have to automate, and you have to rate shop, and it's so complicated you can't do this manually. You got to have a system that does this for you. So automation, and remove that manual process, take the manual aspect of it, let the computer figure out the best way to execute freight, and then have your people focus on the exceptions. So that's what you got to do in TMS today. And so the only way, you put a TMS just by doing better planning, better optimization. Most people save 10% is the classic, but in this COVID environment, because your choices can be really wonky. Like the carrier capacity, a lot of times what a carrier will do is, let's charge you $2 a mile. You get a quote from, well, it's going to be $2 a mile. Well, a lot of times what carriers are doing now is they don't want that load, but they'll come back and give you a quote of like $4 a mile. All right. They don't want that load, but if you come back or your system doesn't care and they give you $4 a mile, they'll find a way to move it for $4 a mile. We're seeing this even in parcel. Like, I'm sorry if I'm rambling on here, but USPS just put in, some surcharges on USPS, some oversized parcels that you ship with USPS, they still will take them. They added $100 surcharge. All right. So if you're just shipping that package normally through USPS and you're not rate shopping, you're going to just start paying that $100 surcharge until somebody gets the bill and says, what? So that's why you have to have a TMS that's doing a real-time rating, because rates are so dynamic right now. They're literally changing daily. And you got to just rate shop on every shipment every day and find the best way to optimize it and manage it. And you got to have a system to do it. And that's what modern TMSs do. So,
Will,
was that a ramble?
No,
I liked it.
Was that a rant?
Question and you gave
that was a rant. That was a rant.
I liked it. That's what I was hoping for, man.
We got a certification there in freight and TMS, Will, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, a ton of information. I want to ask you this question. What's the one thing? Freight, as we've talked about with TMS, but also in the greater picture with freight, there's so much being talked about. There's so much focus. There's so much emphasis. Even, I know we're kind of focused more on ground transportation, but if you look at ocean shipping, the month of January. I think according to certain data, for the last, I'm just picking some round numbers, 20 years, I think it's been about 1,800 containers lost over the course of a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've lost through 3 or 4 incidents already in the month of January, over 4,000 containers. Mm-hmm. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. You were touching on insurance earlier, JP. Just what a crazy time. But what in the wild world of freight, what isn't being talked about that needs to get more attention?
Well, a lot of our agricultural products hit the ports in Q4, and they couldn't find containers to ship them to China. All right. And so those products, a lot of them went to waste or had to be remarketed somewhere else. China is forcing empty containers. More containers are coming back to China empty than are full of products right now. And it's not being talked about, but it's a way China is restricting our exports. It's another way that's going on in the political battle between US and China. But, it makes no sense to me that a carrier somehow China government has got carriers to ship empty containers back to China versus filling with our agricultural products. And that's something that I'm trying to figure out and try to pay attention to, because it's not being talked about, it's not being written about. But it's like you just read some of these stats on these empty containers. You're like, wait a minute, there's freight being stacked up there, and it's looking for containers, and you can't find it. And only some of the most a lot of container steamship lines are Asian flagged, so they're following the something's up with the CCP here on the China Communist Party on somehow they're pressuring these steamship lines to move empties back versus fill them with goods. So
interesting.
It's a situation I can't fully understand, but it opens up the can of worms. It was like we lost, and we're not talking a small percent here. We're talking a significant percent of our agricultural exports to China didn't happen just because they couldn't find containers.
Well, not that lob any allegations, but when the world's richest man, if he can somehow disappear under radar for a couple of months due to some comments, I think anything can happen. It's like Kevin Garnett when he won the championship in that famous interview, anything's possible. It's such a great moment. Will, before we talk about entrepreneurship, kind of as we start to wrap up, JP has shared a lot there. Any follow-up commentary on your end or anything else you want to ask JP while we're still talking freight?
Well, I'm so glad you brought up that container issue. We actually had a couple of our lead coverage clients, Resilience 360 and Redwood Logistics. They commented on this in some materials that went global this week, just talking about that exact issue. It's really it's really something that I learned a lot about, just because of what you were saying. Like, what are the issues? The fact that there's not enough containers for freight.
Right.
That they're having to send them back empty, just like you said, and that there's not enough steel to even start building new ones. It's a really odd problem that you see it's a really odd problem that I think you would only see in this environment now. It's definitely not helping, and it's raising costs for the global shipping that has been disrupted for so long anyway.
Yeah, good points there, and good stuff. Those are two companies. It's good to for the rest of the world to get their POV. They offer solid POV, so that's good stuff there. And it's really it's a fascinating topic. I think ocean shipping in general, and you go down to Savannah. I'm still I'm like a little kid seeing the container ship for the first time. It's fascinating to be up that close.
Seaports.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
All right. So
Jacksonville's my favorite, though. You go there, that's just a beautiful port, and watching that operations, it's just wonderful. So, kid in a candy store, you hit it right.
All right. So now we're going to wrap. We're going to depart the world of freight to the most part. JP, clearly not your first rodeo. You've been a part of founded organizations, been on early stage companies, going through a bunch of different deals and a lot of different growth cycles, you name it. Let's talk about entrepreneurship as we start to wrap. And you also said either pre-show or at the beginning of this one, how such an interesting time, especially for startup in the startup sector in supply chain and logistics and transportation and whatnot. And there's plenty of it, which is great. But what's a couple of tips for the founders out there, the startup team members, folks in early stage companies, but especially the founders? What's a couple of tips you'd offer to those individuals?
Yeah, I guess, done four startups in my career. Right now, financing is always your top issue. You got to make sure, obviously, you got to have your business plan. You have to have your business idea. You have to find good people to work with. You have to have a good, solid business model. But then it comes down to financing. Can you finance? And that's the same with any business, no matter what stages. We're in a really weird stage right now of financing and supply chain where venture cap and PE firms are willing to put in higher multiples than their strategics. I mean, usually through history, a strategic gets involved. That's like a corporate investor. A corporate investor will pay higher multiples for a company or invest at higher multiples just because they have a strategic interest. Like, I'm going to invest in this company because I want to buy them. I want to acquire them. And that usually blows the heck out of VCs or, VCs or PE firms. They just say, oh, I'm not involved here. But right now, VC and PE is willing to pay more than the strategics. So it's an inverse imbalance situation. And the reason is there's so much investment capital sitting out there. They call it dry powder. All right. Was it Fidelity? It was one of those other banks I follow. They're reporting that the dry powder that's trying to be invested right now is over $1 trillion. That's
Wow.
looking for investment. So in other words, there's a lot of money that's looking for a home, which creates the imbalance because it makes it actually since sometimes they have to find a home. And so maybe they're not finding the best homes. So in some ways, as a entrepreneur, it's kind of a buyer's market. So you can be a little more selective on who you take money from and how you take it because they're shopping. So, definitely I would say first advice I'd give somebody to shop around a little bit, but still don't take more than you need. I mean, you give up control. I mean, I run into this all the time throughout my whole history is where you find these companies that they say, well, no, I'm not worried about it. I'll just go raise another $20 million. Now it's like, I'll just go raise another $100 million. I'm going to be $1 billion company. 90+% of the time you talk to that same company 3 years later because they're being fire sold. All right. And I like buying companies like that because, they've put a lot of money into the technology and you can buy them for pennies on the dollar sometimes. And maybe they got a good business model. But so like I said, we're in that inverse curve right now where strategics are being overbid by VC. And it makes it really hard for me because I'm more strategic money and I do corporate development. So versus those VCs they're making it tough. So like I said, as a founder, good money, it's easiest time ever I've seen to raise capital. So if you have an idea, it's a good time to raise a company, to start a company. You can get good capital, you can get good rates. And, if you got a good business plan, I mean, it's like anything else. If your business plan isn't solid, if your market isn't solid, you're still going nowhere. You're just spending somebody else's money and you're going to fail. But, it's a good time. You got a good idea, go for it. Now, there isn't a lot of startups out there in our space though. Still, it's tough. It's not easy anymore. It's tough. So it's just because every good idea has been done and, and R&D costs, like me and my TMS side, I'm not kidding. I've got more than 50 million into my R&D costs and it took 8 years. And that was putting together intellectual property from all the best people that we could possibly find across the industry. And sometimes you can't find that intellectual property. So that's what I look for. So
outstanding. A lot of good stuff there. All right. So Will, of all that advice that JP just offered and market commentary, what was the most important thing that you heard him say?
Well, you're gonna laugh, but it was the dry powder because the dry powder. I agree with that. You're seeing, I guess, exactly the parameters that JP outlined, but also because it brought me back to baseball, in that all these guys are sitting on the dry powder of the profits that they have made for multiple years, and they're crying poor over one bad year, sitting on their dry powder, including the Cardinals, and not spending that money on free agents to make their team better. Even though the Cardinals in particular have Ballpark Village just oozing money into their coffers. But it be that as it may, one bad season and, oh, no, we can't afford.
World's ending. Yeah.
The world's ending. Yes.
We're going into rebuilding phrase.
That's a term that has been used a lot, which I immediately just reflex to it. But I loved your analysis on it especially for the PE market.
Agreed. And it does drop. I love any I guess that's a simile. It's not a metaphor, right? I always get those interchanged, but regardless, it paints a great visual, and I love how that plays into, because folks know exactly what you're talking about. Well, I hate to wind this thing down. It's been so much fun from a variety of angles, but of course, selfishly baseball. I'm a big baseball nerd. I love y'all's take on some things we talked about there. Of course, the wide world of freight and TMS and what's going on in supply chain and why it's important now, and some of the cool things you're doing at 3G TMS. So it's tough to recap in a couple of minutes, but JP, really appreciate your time. Let's make sure that our community members and audience can connect with you and the team. What's the best way they can connect with y'all?
Me, it's hit the website, 3gtms.com. I mean, my LinkedIn is simple, JP Wiggins at 3gtms.com. That's generally the best way. If someone has reach out to me that way. Email is the same, JP Wiggins at 3gtms.com is email. But I'll be honest, my inbox is so overloaded because I've been doing this for 8 years that every company, you know what, if you're trying to sell me new leads, don't contact me. So, or car insurance.
What about the Glengarry leads?
Yeah. The Glengarry and Ross, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. Glengarry leads.
Well, always a pleasure, JP. Really appreciate your time. Will, let's make sure folks can connect with you as well. What's the easiest way?
Yeah, leadcoverage.com, will at leadcoverage.com, and our LinkedIn is active and hopping and all that good stuff. Our team is always doing stuff.
Unless you're, you don't want, no Cubs fans can reach out.
No,
right?
Of course, Cubs fans. We will absolutely take a Cubs fan's money.
Cubs fans are great. I sold my tickets to Game 7 of the World Series at Indians. I made like $5,000 per ticket to some stupid Cubs fan who came just to watch. Now I had to be in Texas, so I had to sell my tickets, but I made $10,000 off of some Cubs fan. I love those guys.
They've only let down their fan base again for what, the 10th time in their 100-year history. I mean, I don't know why anybody would be a Cubs fan, but
you got to have some sympathy for them.
You got your one championship, and you can have it again in another 100 years.
But I'm a South Side guy, just so you guys know. So
just a little disclaimer, legal disclaimer here.
Legal disclaimer.
The views of our guests don't necessarily reflect the views of our team here at Supply Chain Now. So, but no, I think it comes in. That's the fun part of baseball, right? You've got a lot of camaraderie and kindred spirits, but you got some friendly and not so friendly rivalries, which is part of one of the best parts of the game. So I'm just glad. Hopefully we'll be talking about spring games here in 30, 45 days, maybe. So, but regardless, big thanks, JP Wiggins, who I'm convinced is a second baseman from the 80s. We'll see if I can't find outfielder, see if I can't find that upper deck card. He's also co-founder and leader of corporate development and business strategy at 3G TMS. Thanks so much, JP.
Thanks for having us.
Will Haraway with the lead coverage team. Thanks so much, Will. We'll talk more about baseball. I promise you again soon.
Yes, sir. Always a pleasure to join you, and congrats on all the great work that Supply Chain Now is doing. I'm enjoying watching it.
Well, we appreciate that. Appreciate the partnership and love. Content is North Star, and I really enjoyed our conversation here today to our community and to our audience. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as much as we have. Hey, if you like conversations like this, find us at supplychainnow.com. And you can find us wherever you get your podcast from. Subscribe for free so you don't miss conversations and great guests like JP and Will here. Hey, we're going to challenge you like we challenge ourselves. I got number 44 in my little Zoom thing. I wish I could plaster it on the wall. But Will talked about some of the incredible people we've lost here before, here just in recent weeks. And if you're an Atlanta fan, Don Sutton, and of course, the King, Hammer and Hank Aaron's a big part of the massive loss. But hey, flip side, he leaves an incredible legacy, one we've got to embrace and act on. And hey, do good, give forward, but be the change. That's right. Be the change. Be like Hank Aaron. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.